Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again in day 3 of our online faculty development program, sponsored by AICT IST and organized by Center of Cryptography, Cybersecurity and Digital Forensics at LNM-IIT Jaipur. Today we have with us Mr. Krishna Suri Narayanam. Krishna Suri Narayanam is a senior research software engineer at IBM Research Lab India. He has completed his BTech in Computer Science and MS by Research in Computer Science and Engineering from IIT Madras. His research area is blockchain. He has also worked at Symantec Pune for 4 years. He is a co-inventor of 20 plus granted US patents and 25 plus other patent applications filed at USPTO. He is the recipient of IBM's 13th Invention Plateau. He has played the role of chairperson, Invention Committee, that is IDT lead of IBM Research India during the year of 2019. He got elected as IBM Master Inventor effective from October 1st, 2019. He obtained Client Value Outstanding Technical Achievement Award. This is a IBM Enterprise Recognition Award for his contribution to Statual FOAK Turnaround Management Project and PG&E Resource Positioner Resource Planning for Service Restoration in Emergencies Project in October 2017. He has obtained Outstanding Technical Achievement Award. Again, this is IBM Enterprise Recognition Award for his contribution to IBM Research Accomplishment Project work, Utility Innovations to Embrace Sustainability and Climate Change in April 2019 and for his contribution to IBM Blockchain Invoicing for TradeLens project in January 2020. He has obtained Research Division Award for his contribution to the project Research Contribution to Business Contingency Management in June 2013 and for the project Strategic Network Design and Analysis in April 2016. So it has been a great honor for all of us to having such an honorable and experienced person, Mr. Krishna Suri Narayanam. Today he will give his talk on Hyperledger Fabric. So I would like to request Krishna Suri to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Good morning, everybody. So I think I will start without further delay. I think we already got delayed. So today's topic is Hyperledger Fabric permissioned blockchain platform and its industry applications. So I will go over first some of the background about blockchain and then introduce you to over the next 1 hour 15 minutes time some of the concepts related to Hyperledger Fabric, which is permissioned a blockchain platform contributed by IBM and open source platform. So blockchain recap. Blockchain builds on basic business concepts and these are all some of the fundamental business concepts or concepts associated with the blockchain below, like business networks connect businesses and participants, whoever is participating in the blockchain network, they need an identity to join the network, and assets flow over business network. So here flow is a logical flow where asset transfer takes place as the transactions keep happening so that assets keep transferring their ownership from one participant to the other participant over the course of time. That's how we refer to it as assets flow over business networks. Then transactions describe asset exchange. So who is the previous owner? Who is the current owner? All this is decided as part of the transactions that take place on the business network. Okay. So the contracts are the basic components that actually drive the execution behavior implemented in any transaction. So they represent these the physical contracts in a business network scenario are represented using smart contracts in case of blockchain, and they do the same purpose, like simulating the execution behavior that is required as part of the transaction is carried out using smart contracts. And then the last but not the least is the ledger, which is the log of transactions. So which is nothing but we call as blockchain. So we will see what is the structure going to be for a given ledger. And the blockchain is a shared and replicated ledger. So it possesses the following properties like consensus, which means any block or any transaction that get added to blockchain network is added post consensus among the participants of the network. So now there are different variations how this consensus is obtained. We'll see that soon. So based on that, the type of the blockchain also actually is decided. This is one of the factors. And then immutability. Because of the chain property of blockchain, any transaction that is added to blockchain network or the ledger is immutable in nature. So which means that if you want to undo, it is not possible. So once done any transaction, it is permanently remembered on the ledger. Next is finality. So what finality means is that in the Hyperledger Fabric, for example, there is no fork possible post validation of any transaction, which means that once you validate a transaction, where validation is one of the three phases of execution, namely endorse, order, and validate. Those are the three different phases of any transaction execution in Hyperledger Fabric. So we will see more details about it soon. So once any transaction is validated and added to Hyperledger Fabric ledger, there is no possibility that it cannot be undone, right? So it is final in its for its next entire lifetime. So this is what is called finality. And especially Hyperledger Fabric is designed in such a way that finality is one of the important characteristics attained by any of the transactions added to blockchain, Hyperledger Fabric blockchain. The next is provenance. Provenance is what it helps to track the history of ownership over a course of time for any asset. So these are all the fundamental features of any blockchain ledger, and most of these features in some way or other are common across any of the blockchain networks, right? So let us move to the next slide. So what is Hyperledger Fabric? It is a Linux Foundation Hyperledger blockchain platform. It is a collaborative effort created to advance cross-industry blockchain technologies for businesses. So which means that there are a lot of participants who are participating in the development process, and also it is because it's an open source Linux Foundation project. Many people tend to be, for many people, this is the default first choice when they want to start trying out anything related to blockchain, right? So it has got a lot of popularity in the recent past, and so one of the attributes, just to confirm that the amount of popularity, is the number of conference papers that are presented or submitted these days for the last 3 years, right? It's more than, I read somewhere, more than 500 plus number of conference papers alone on Hyperledger Fabric. So which means that which tells the popularity of this type of blockchain platform. So the Hyperledger Fabric, it's an implementation of blockchain technology that is intended as a foundation for developing blockchain applications. So it is a platform, and if you intend to develop any application, you can use this as the infrastructure underlying, which can guarantee all the functionalities that we have just seen. And some of the key technical features of Hyperledger Fabric are a shared ledger and smart contracts implemented as chain code. And we will see the chain code can be developed in a variety of languages, namely Go, Java, and so on. There are a variety of language support for you to develop the smart contracts. So next is privacy and permissioning through membership services. So Hyperledger Fabric falls under a category called it's a permissioned private blockchain network. So permission means that any participant part of this network is onboarded with some pre-approval, and everybody knows in the network who are all the other participants and their roles. Right? This is opposite to, in against to the public blockchains, where the blockchain network is open for anybody to join, and there is no way to track currently who are all the participants in the network or whom you can allow into the network. There is no such control. Whereas in Hyperledger kind of permissioned blockchain networks, every participant knows who are all the other participants. So this is the fundamental difference. And second one is that it is a private network. So the transactions are limited to within the participants, right? So they are not open, and there are different privacy and confidentiality mechanisms to further keep the transaction privacy and confidentiality within the peers of the network itself. We will see few of those mechanisms and techniques also over the course of time. Now, modular architecture, it is based on a modular architecture, and it has a lot of hosting options. So modular architecture, what it means is that because of this modularity with Hyperledger Fabric, it is possible to extend many different components of Hyperledger Fabric as per the requirement of a specific application. So while there are default modules, you can always write your own customized module and deploy so that it can achieve the specific task in hand for a given user. So that is what it means as modular architecture, and this is one of the outstanding or distinguishing features of Hyperledger Fabric. Right, so the version 1.0 is out sometime around 2017, but right now it is in it has gone over different releases via 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and so on. Right now we are around 2.x, right? So it is ever increasing, and so many contributors are contributing, and I mean, there is a lot of stability in the product today, and a lot of features are getting added even today, right? So here are some of the design goals of Fabric. So some of the design goals are that better reflect business processes by specifying who endorses the transaction. So the endorsement is nothing but execution of the transaction, and in Hyperledger Fabric, associated with each chain code, it is a priori decided who are all the endorsers going to be for a given transaction, right? So this actually designed in such a way to reflect the real life scenarios where the transactions are controlled by the execution of the transaction is controlled by some authorities, right? So to just capture that real life setting, so this kind of mechanism is built, and support for broader regularity requirements for privacy and confidentiality. This I have already told. Privacy is typically achieved something called by creating channels. So each channel represents actually the intended participants for a business transaction. So only the intended participants are made part of a given channel. So that's how we achieve privacy. And coming to the confidentiality, there are different mechanisms to achieve confidentiality. Namely, we will see private data collections and encrypted transactions and so on. Right, so on the scale the number of participants and the transaction throughput. So it is possible to increase the number of participants, and also the transaction throughput currently we are achieving in Fabric is one of the highest when you compare with any of the other blockchain platforms actually. So that's how I mean, it is one of the leading platforms also because of the high transaction throughput rate. And So there is something called non-deterministic transaction execution behavior. So this actually is the primary reason we eliminate this non-deterministic transaction execution behavior, and this in turn enables Fabric to achieve eliminate double spending problem. I hope that by this time you might be all aware of the double spending, where the any given asset cannot be used for consumption in two transactions at any point in time. In other words, you can tell that only one owner or participant is owning that asset. So two owners cannot own any asset at any given point in time. So this is called double spending, and that can be achieved with this with the help of this specific functionality in Fabric, and a support for rich data queries of the ledger. So again, we'll see there are different possibilities. Actually, there is something called state database, and there can be a default configuration for state database, namely level DB, which does not support rich data queries, whereas there is something called an alternative CouchDB. If you configure that CouchDB as the state database along with the Hyperledger Fabric configuration, then this kind of rich data query support is also enabled. And dynamic update of the chain code as well as the network configuration. So there are functionalities, facilities using which you can submit some special configuration transactions which help update the network configuration, and also it is possible to dynamically update the smart contracts that are encoding the business transaction execution behavior. And support for multiple credential and cryptographic services, this we will see, right? And bring your own identity support for external CAs, so that we will see over the course of time. But these are some of the fundamental design goals. So let me start with the architecture, different components part of Hyperledger Fabric. The first and foremost part is the ordering service. So this is, again, it's a node or peer. Both node and peer, we use these terms interchangeably in Fabric. So either it is a node or peer, it is a server which is capable of doing some computation, right? And which can bear a specific role in the Hyperledger Fabric network. Now, ordering service, this is the service which is responsible for cutting the blocks of the blockchain, where each block consists of one or more transactions, right? So this is one of the fundamental components of Fabric. The second one is peer. So peers represent the network participants. Each peer consists of a ledger. So this is the blockchain, which is nothing but the list of blocks that are part of the channel, right? And where each block consists of one or more transactions. So this is the ledger which is available associated with the peer, and there can be a chain code, or there may not be chain code existing. In this case, for example, we are showing here that the peer is associated with two chain codes A and B. They represent the two different smart contracts and events. So as part of completing execution of any transaction, so events get emitted so that the transaction submitters can get notifications, and they can check whether their submitted transaction has passed or failed. So that can be enabled with this asynchronous communication mechanism, which is event mechanism that is available in Hyperledger Fabric. And then we have another role called admins. Each peer has an admin, so who controls actually the specific behavior of any peer. And other components part of Fabric are client application. So client applications interact with any of the network components, for example, the ordering service or the peer via software development kit. So they communicate using this SDK, and again, this SDK can be in many different languages. There is support for Go, Java, and so on, right? And along with each client, there is a local MSP associated with the client application. So we call this as client application or client interchangeably again, right? So, and next, an important component is the Fabric CA. This is packaged along with the Hyperledger Fabric by default. This is the certificate authority, CA, Fabric CA, which is responsible for issuing different identities to the different participants. Either it can be a peer, ordering service, admin, or users of the client, for example. Whoever is associated with the Fabric, they need to have an identity, right? So because when somebody is transacting, we need to know who is the transactor submitter, for example. So how do we know it? So there has to be one identity associated, and this identity must be recognizable by every other participant in the network. So what we do is that we have a Fabric CA. So this is the default identity, and which is packaged along with the Fabric platform. So everybody knows that when this Fabric CA issues an identity, every other knows that this is a proper identity that can be used on this network. Hence, any transaction submitted by any other user using that identity can be believed by any other participant, right? So that is the identity providing service. And membership services, we will see details of these again. And external CA, it's an optional service. So how applications interact with the ledger? We have the developer who will develop the smart contract and the client application. So if any user wants to create a Fabric application, there are two components that specific user need to develop. First one is the smart contract, which is nothing but which encapsulates the different smart contract, the business transaction behaviors, right? So this is the smart contract, which can be developed in Go or Java kind of languages. And there has to be a client application, which is actually providing the interface to the user to interact with the smart contracts. So in turn, the client application makes invoke calls or query calls into the smart contracts via the SDK. And what can be the different types of transactions? We can have a get, put, or delete kind of transactions. Here, just to note the difference between the different transactions. For example, if it is a get transaction, the specific value of a key, which is queried by the user, is referred from by looking into the world state, the state database, and returned. Hence, any get transactions won't get added as part of the blockchain ledger. Only the put and delete transactions get added to the blockchain ledger. In case of put and delete transactions, both the ledger gets updated and the world state gets updated, right? So these two, this is the blockchain and this is the world state. So this world state, actually what it contains is that the different the variables or keys that are referred as part of different transactions, what are their latest values. So that is kept track using the world state. So for example, you might be having two transactions which change the value of a key, K1, from initial value 1 to 5 by the transaction 1. Then the world state will contain value of key K1 is equal to 5. Then what happens? There is a new block which contains a transaction which is changing the current value of the key K1 from 5 to 25, for example. Now, what will happen? That transaction gets added to the ledger here, and the world state also is updated to reflect the fact that now the value of the key K1 is 25, right? So world state will only track the latest value for any given key, whereas in the blockchain we have the list of blocks and each block contains all the transactions. So by referring to this blockchain, you can even have the history of each key. So by referring to this blockchain, you can now see that, okay, the recent value of key1 is 25, though sometime back it was 5, and initially the value was 1. So all that information you can track by referring to this blockchain, whereas only the recent information is stored in the world state, just for the fact that it will help improve the transaction execution efficiency. For example, any query transaction, you don't need to refer to the ledger to know what is the current latest state of any key. You just refer to the world state, whatever is the recent state, just return that. So similarly, during the execution process also, the endorsement phase by the endorsing peers that we see soon. So this gets referred to look at the current state values of any key. So this is the purpose of maintaining a separate world state. And the delete transaction, there is no difference between the put and delete transaction when it comes to getting added to the ledger, but the only difference is that the key gets deleted from the world state. In case of put, the key gets updated, whereas in case of delete, the key gets deleted from the world state. But just note the fact that delete doesn't remove the transaction itself from the ledger. Every transaction is maintained by the ledger. Only the variable is deleted from the world state. So that is the specific behavior. And then we have already seen transactions actually emit events at the end of transaction execution. The different other fabric components of importance are the blockchain and the world state, which we have already seen. The blockchain actually consists of a list of transactions included in a block, and any block has a pointer to the hash of its previous block. So this is why we say it is a blockchain. Hence, because it maintains a hash to its previous block, it is very difficult for anybody to change the contents of any block, because if you change the contents of a block, you have to subsequently keep changing accordingly all the other following blocks. Otherwise, anybody who is verifying, they will be able to know that, okay, if you change something, some transaction read set or write set, for example, then the hash of this block will change. And when you refer what is the hash of this specific block in the subsequent block, then they won't match. That's how you will find out that, okay, there is some tampering that happened to this specific block. So it is not possible for anybody without changing all the subsequent blocks a specific content, which is very difficult in nature. So that's how the immutability is guaranteed in case of blockchain. The next specific thing is a separate ledger is maintained for each channel, the peer joins. So a peer, as we have already seen, it's a server, as I said, or a node. It can be taking part of many different channels, and for each channel that it joins, there is a separate ledger. When I say ledger, both the components are part of the ledger, the world state and the blockchain. Right. Next, transactions are written to the blockchain. Right. So both the read and write sets are written in the block, as well as the write set is the recent write set is committed to the world state. The next is channel configurations are also written to the blockchain. So these are all the special configuration transactions which are submitted to the blockchain whenever there is a requirement in the specific channel behavior. And as I said, the world state can be a level DB or CouchDB. If it is CouchDB, then there is support for rich queries. And the smart contract, can you give me just 1 minute? Hello? Hello? Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting, sorry. And the smart contract actually decides what is written to the world state. We'll see this. So some of the nodes and their roles. A node, it can be a peer, and which maintains the ledger and state. So by default, any peer in the blockchain network maintains the ledger and the state database, and it commits the transactions. Having said that, it is not, as I already told, it is not mandatory to hold any smart contract. Without holding the smart contract also, any peer can validate the transactions that are part of any block and commit the transactions. So this can be done by any peer. And then endorsing peer. So this is the specific peer which is capable of simulating the business transaction. And for a given chain code or channel, we associate who are all the eligible endorsing peers at the time of creating that channel or chain code. And then ordering node. So these are the special service nodes actually which are responsible for creating the blocks, right? So we'll see. So this one is the specific execution behavior. As I said, any transaction that is added to Hyperledger Fabric actually undergoes these three phases of execution behavior. The first phase is endorsement phase, where actually some endorsing peer simulates the transaction and generates the read write sets. Then the ordering phase, where the blocks are created by the ordering service, which consists of the transactions. So one or more transactions are bundled into each block, and a block is formatted and which is disseminated to all the peers in the network by the ordering service node. So this is the orderer. So the next is validate. So once a block is received by any of the peer in the network, they have to validate the block first. Then they will go over all the transactions and validate each transaction independently and commit to the ledger and also update the state database. So this is the validate phase. So this is a three-step procedure, and this is the specific design paradigm, right? And it is opposite to or in contrast to the other popular design paradigms like order and execute in case of any public blockchains. So what in case of public blockchains they happen is that first the transaction is ordered and then it is executed by any peer, right? So this is fundamentally different from that specific architectural behavior, and there are certain goals behind choosing the specific behavior, right? So one of the fundamental reasons being, as I said, finality. So this specific architecture ensures that the finality of transactions is guaranteed, and which is not exactly guaranteed in case of with a certain probability. In case of other public blockchains, a given transaction might get ending up not getting added to the blockchain. Whereas in case of Hyperledger Fabric, once a transaction is placed or included in a block, then it is guaranteed that it will be part of the ledger eventually. So that is the specific difference. And yeah, so this specific and this three-phase process also helps actually what we call is that achieve concurrency in case of Hyperledger Fabric. So because there can be different endorsing peers for different chain codes and channels. So at any given point in time, multiple endorsing peers may be executing multiple different transactions. It is not that all the participants are executing the same transaction at any given point in time, but it is possible because there are two channels and two endorsing peers are the endorsers for two different channels, and at any given point in time they may be executing two different transactions. Hence we ensure that this helps in achieving higher throughput of transaction execution, right, in case of Fabric. So let us see in more details the different stages of transaction execution in Hyperledger Fabric. So the first part, I'm assuming that by this time you are comfortable with the different terminology over here. As I explained, just I will reiterate once. The first, it is very important, by the way, to understand these different components of this architecture. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to follow this transaction workflow. The first component is the endorser. So they maintain a ledger, and endorsers will have the chain codes, access to the chain codes. So endorser is nothing but it's a peer again, but it is a specific role played by the peer. And what endorser does? Endorser actually executes a given transaction for a channel or chain code. So this is the specific role of endorsers. And there can be one or more endorsers for a chain code. The next is the committing peers. These are the committing peers. So they participate, they are part of the channel, and the committing peers may have access to the smart contract, that is the chain code, or not. For example, in this scenario, the peer P4 is part of the same channel, but it doesn't have access to the smart contract. Whereas peer P3 is also a committing peer. Here P3 and P4 both are committing peers, but it has access to the chain code. Now, in this specific channel, we have three endorsers, E0, E1, and E2. What it means is that any of them is capable of executing or simulating the transaction. Now, who are the output from which specific endorser is required and so on is again decided by something called endorsement policy. We will see that soon. And this is the ordering service that is part of this architecture. So the first step is that transaction proposal submission. So the client comes, the client actually submits a transaction to all the endorsers, because endorsers are the parties who execute the transaction. So he has to submit the transaction to all the endorsers. Of course, it is not mandatory to submit to all the endorsers. As per the endorsement policy, he may be choosing, the client may be choosing what are the endorsing peers that I have to submit the client transaction proposal to. So that will be decided by the client by looking at the endorsement policy. So for example, in this case, assume that all three endorsing peers, he can submit the transaction. So that is the first step. The second step is the endorsing peers, they actually execute the simulate the transaction. Right, so each of E0, E1, and E2, they will execute the transaction proposal. So one point to note is that during this course of execution, it's only the endorsing peers compute the read sets and the write set for the transaction. So for any given transaction, what is the input? That is called the read set, and what is the output? That is called the write set. Now, when it comes to read set, the endorsing peers, they refer to the state database, as I already told. They will see if I have two keys, for example, X and Y as my read set, what is the specific version of those keys that is currently available on the state database. The version of the key is, for example, version V5 is there with key X, and version V7 is there with version key Y. Then these versions are also tracked as part of the read set. It is very important to note that this version is reused down the line at the time of verification, and this version should match at the time of verification. Only then the transaction will be deemed as successful transaction. Otherwise, the transaction will be marked as failed. So we will see that. So we will track this read set and write set. Write set also, again, it tracks what are the variables which are updated as part of the transaction execution, and what is the version of each of these variables at the end of this transaction, right? So by the end of the transaction, the current write sets are, let's say, Z. Z is the key, specific key, which is updated as part of this transaction, and the current version is, let us say, 10, V10. Then at the end of this transaction, it is updated from V10 to V11. So what the write set will track is that Z is the write set variable, and the updated version is V11. So this is what is associated in the endorsement. So once the endorsing peers execute the transaction, that is simulate the transaction and compute the read write set, they will actually send back the execution output, that is called the endorsement, along with their identity. They sign that endorsement output and send back to the client. By the way, before accepting any transaction, each endorser also does some validation whether this transaction is submitted by a valid client or not. So they will validate that also. So this kind of validation happens throughout by any participant in any role. They out the intended behavior, but they validate whatever is given to them. Right? If it is endorsing peers, they will validate whether the transaction is submitted by intended client or not, whether valid client or not, whether the transaction proposal is properly formed or not. All those validations they do. Similarly, when the endorsing peers, they send back the endorsement, then the client again checks whether I'm receiving the endorsement from a authorized proper endorsing peer or not. So this kind of check happens throughout. The next step is proposal response. As I already told, each individual endorsing peer responds back to the client with whatever they have computed. Then the client actually what it does is that it validates actually. It receives three responses from three different endorsing peers. Now it will check whether the responses are in sync with, in accordance with the endorsement policy. What the endorsement policy says is that, for example, for a given transaction, okay, E0 and E1 are mandatory to execute this transaction, and the outputs needs to be the same. So, for example, E0 is outputting Z as the right set, and E1 is outputting Y as the right set, for example. Then there is a conflict in the right set. So in that case, client knows that at least one of them is not correct. So it has to drop that endorsement, and it will resubmit the transaction proposal and collects the endorsement again. So it has to collect that way until it passes the endorsement criteria. That is, all the endorsements that it receives, they have to be the same, right? So it has to pass that check. So until that check is not passed, it cannot create the actual transaction proposal which can be submitted to the order in the next step. So once the validation is done, the endorsements are collected properly, then it will include all the endorsements in the as part of the transaction and sends to the ordering service. Now remember the fact that if we are till now talking with respect to one client and one transaction, but there can be many different clients in your system, and all of them may be going through the similar workflow, right? So now if you consider the ordering service at any given point in time, it gets transactions from different clients. Now what it does is that in this specific step, it collects the different transactions from different clients and forms a block. Now how it forms, it is completely up to the ordering service decision. So whether it can include a specific transaction or it wants to choose not to include a transaction is very local to the ordering service. So all the peers in the channel respect the decision by the ordering service, right? So this is typically a cluster of nodes which is acting as the ordering service here, and there are different configuration options possible. We will see that later. Next. So here the ordering service includes the transactions whichever it wants to choose to include and creates a block. Once the block is ready, it will disseminate the block to all the peers in the network. It knows who are all the, by looking at the channel and its configuration, it knows that who are all the peers in this network, irrespective of the fact that whether a peer is a committing peer or endorsement peer, it will send the block to all the peers. So ordering service, as I said, there are different possibilities. One is solo, where only one single node is configured to perform this specific task. And in case of Kafka, crash fault tolerance is also achieved. This is another possibility, and there are different options. Again, this is a modular in nature. You can plug in any different ordering service as part of Fabric, right? So this is the deliver transaction phase. So in this phase, specifically, the block is disseminated to all the blocks, all the peers. Now, once the peers receive a given block, they will actually validate the block first, and then go over all the transactions one by one and validate each transaction. As part of validation of each transaction, there are two steps carried out. One is the VSCC mechanism. What it does is that it checks whether the endorsement part of the transaction proposal is valid or not. That means that, again, by referring to each committing peer or endorsing peer does the same task. What it does is that it refers to the endorsement policy. This is the endorsement policy. It comes to know who are all the endorsing peers, whether the endorsements from the intended or required endorsing peers is included as part of the transaction or not, it will check first. And if the endorsement is included, then whether the endorsements are proper or not, it will check. So that is the second check. And then once these two checks are done, then there is something called multi-version concurrency control MECC check that happens here. So this is actually, as I said earlier, is responsible to ensure that no double spending happens actually. So what it does is that whether I'm in a given transaction, if the read set says that for any given key, a specific version is to be used, whether the state DB is also reflecting the same version for that key currently or not. Just before committing a transaction, each peer ensures that the key, which is part of the read set, whether the key version included in the transaction proposal, whether that is the exact key version on the state database locally or not. If it is the case, then only the write set is written to the state database. If that is not the case, then the transaction is marked as failed. And of course, even though the transaction is marked as failed, that will be still part of the blockchain and the block, but the transaction is marked as failed transaction. So that is the only difference. And because it's a failed transaction, the write set is not getting updated on the state DB. So these are the specific steps done as part of validate transaction by any peer, irrespective of the role. So actually this guarantees the fact that because this is done in a deterministic manner, this ensures that the ledger that is associated with any peer in the network is on the same state. So this is the specific step. And then notify transactions at the end of transaction execution, the event is emitted. So if any specific client is subscribed to that event, he will come to know that, okay, so this specific transaction got executed, and whether it got failed or success, he will come to know. Right, so this is the last step of transaction execution. So the different phases that we have now looked at can be summarized using the swim lane. So the first process is, so here if you see, this is the client, and these are the three different endorsing peers, and this is the ordering service, and this is one committer. There can be one or more committers. And these are all the and again these committers may be having access to the chain code or not. Now the first step is the transaction is submitted by the client to all the endorsing peers. So all the endorsing peers, after receiving the transaction proposal, they simulate locally the transaction. So that is the execution of the transaction that happens with every endorsing peer. Once they complete simulation of transaction, that is step 2, they respond back to the client with the endorsement that they computed along with their signature. All the endorsing peers here you can see are responding back to the client. The client, after receiving the endorsements from the endorsing peers, it will validate by exercising the endorsement policy, whether in accordance to the endorsement policy, whether the client has received the responses or not. Once that is done, it creates the transaction message, and the transaction message is in turn submitted to the ordering service. So you can see that the client actually communicates with two different parties. One is the endorsing peers, another is the ordering service. Endorsing peers at the time of transaction proposal submission, and with the ordering service at the time of transaction message submission. Right, once the transaction message is submitted to the ordering service, it creates the block by collecting such transactions from different clients and including in a block, creating a block, and then it disseminates the created block to all the peers in the network, in respect of whether it is endorsing peer or committing peer. It disseminates the transaction. Once any a block is received by a peer in the network, they actually exercise the validation phase, where they will check whether read write sets are proper and endorsements are proper, and if everything is okay, write set is committed to the state database and the block is added to the ledger. So these are all the different steps of transaction execution. This is the life cycle typical of Fabric transaction. right? So there are of course variations when we see in case of private data collection or encrypted transactions, there are certain changes at different components, but this is in case of a typical transaction, this is the workflow. The next one is the ordering service. So as I said already, there are multiple options possible, and it is pluggable in nature. And so the specific Kafka ordering service, it requires 3 minimum nodes, and when it is configured as Kafka, then for each channel actually only one of the orderers actually acts as the master, which can create the blocks. All the other nodes in the ordering service, they follow the specific master for that channel. So for different channels, different ordering nodes will bear the role of master. So what the advantage with master is that only one person, one ordering service will take the decision of including which transactions into the block, and it will subsequently pass that information to all the other nodes in the ordering service, and everybody will respect that decision. So this is also helpful in the following sense that if due to any reason, if the master is down, then out of the remaining nodes in the ordering service, one get elected as the master for that channel, and it will carry out the same procedure on behalf of the previous master. So this is the typical workflow in a case of ordering service node. And then is the channels. So the channel, it hosts the chain code, and channel defines actually what are all the, who are all the network participants and so on. And chain code is installed on peers to access the world state, and the chain code is instantiated on specific channels only. And only when chain code is instantiated, then the transaction execution can happen. So single channel network, there can be many different variations. One is single channel network. In this case, the participants are part of only one channel. Having said that, there can be multiple smart contracts even in the single channel. So you can see that there are 2 smart contracts in this case, A and B. And we have a ordering service in the channel, and we have endorsing peers in the channel. It is possible that as in this special case, all the network peers are endorsers. It is also possible. Nothing can stop it. So whereas some of the endorsers may be playing the endorsing peer role for a specific chain code, whereas the others may be playing the endorsing peer role for a different chain code B. But it is possible that all of them can be endorsing peers, right? So at least one has to be the endorsing peer, otherwise nobody will be able to execute the transaction, right? So minimum we need to have one endorsing peer who can execute the transactions, and at the maximum all of them can be endorsing peers. So multi-channel network, if you see that in this scenario, you can see that there are 2 channels. One is the red channel and the blue channel. So the chain codes Y and Z are part of the red channel peers, that is E0 and E3. Now if you see, E3 is participating in both the channels, red and blue channel. E2 and E1 are participating only in the blue channel, and E0 is participating in the red channel. So if you see red channel, there are 2 members, E0 and E3. And out of the 2 members, both of them have access to the chain code. And if you see the blue channel, there are only 3 members, E1, E2, E3. Out of the 3, again, all of them have access to the chain code A and B. And one specific difference you can see here is that E3 is part of both the channels. Now what can happen is that a client which is willing to submit a transaction to the red channel, they can communicate with E0 or E3 and submit the transaction. Similarly, a client, it can be the same client or different client, who is willing to submit a transaction to the blue channel, they can connect to one of the peers of the blue channel, for example in this case E1, and it can submit the transaction. Next is a fabric peer. The different components associated with the peer are the following. So by the way, I just want to pause for a minute if you have any queries.
Sir, once there is a
Hello.
one.
Yeah, madam. Okay.
Somebody asked, what is a channel in Fabric Ledger?
Okay, so as I said, right, it's the consortium actually. So it represents who are all the participants of a network. So you can create a channel with the different participants of your network, and only the channel members can have access to the data in the network. So for example, if you consider a bank transaction, there is a receiver, there is a sender, and the bank. Now these three participants can be part of this channel. Now there is a sender organization, so amount is debited from one of the accounts of the users to and it is credited into another user of this account, right? So all these three can be the user, the account from which the amount is debited can be one organization A, and amount credited into which account, that can be the organization B, and there is a bank. So now in this case, the channel will contain at least the three parties. Now they can communicate in this channel. For example, one transaction is a debit transaction, right? Another transaction can be credit transaction or something else. So this only channel members will be able to participate and transact among themselves. So for example, if it is a you are creating a channel for a university kind of scenario, the university can be one organization, and there may be a government agency which is providing regulations and all, which all the universities need to follow. So in that case, the different universities may be forming one peer in the channel, right? University A, University B, right? So IIT Delhi, IIT Mumbai, IIT Madras, they can be the different organizations and they can be channel participants. And similarly, there is a Government of India regulatory body is there, right? MHRD, for example, they are running a peer. So they are another peer in this organization, and the different transactions can be, for example, in this scenario, what is the format of different courses or whatever it is, whichever is decided, right? So they can be the business transactions in this network. So we will have, so once if two or more parties are participating in a network, they all need to be part of the same channel is the requirement. So if there are no further questions, let me go ahead. If you consider a peer, it can be part of multiple channels. What it means now, as per the example that I told you, is that I am a peer, I am an organization. I can be part of many different types of transactions, right? So, for example, I am part of a banking network where I participate in the money transactions. That is one thing. I again may be part of a school network where I am participating in the or university network where I'm participating with the universities, right? And similarly, I can be part of many. I do many different business transactions daily, right? So I will be taking part of each channel that is intended to carry out that specific business transaction. So any peer typically is part of more than one channel. Now this channel is used to provide privacy among the transaction participants, right? So that is the channel. So in this example, we show that three channels are there, blue, red, and green. And then we have the chain codes. The chain code again is specific to a channel, right? And it is installed with the each peer in the channel or not with each peer. And MSP that I will come to know that I will come to this point in soon. Next is the ledger. So as I said, we need to maintain the ledger, that is the blockchain, and our listed with each channel. So we have 3 channels, blue, red, and green, and we have 3 ledgers, blue, red, and green here. One ledger is associated with one channel. So so to summarize, each peer connects to one or more channels, and it has ledgers associated, and we have installed chain codes, and the chain code can be instantiated, in which case new transactions can take place. Whenever the chain code is instantiated, then there is a Docker container that is created, which will be simulating the transactions. Note that a chain code can be part of different channels, and corresponding to each chain code, there is a Docker container, right? So that will be common across different channels. So the different channels can reuse the same Docker container consisting of that chain code. This is because chain code is a stateless service actually. So it doesn't maintain any states. Hence, anybody can be making call to a function inside the chain code. So what else we have? We have access to local MSP, and each peer emits events at the end of each transaction. Next is the client application. The client application has access to MSP, and it has SDK using which it can communicate or, for example, invoke the smart contract functions, and it knows that what are all the channels that I can participate with. So probably at this point in time, yeah, we have come to the Fabric CA. So let me go over what is the role of CA, certificate authority, and what is meant by MSP, membership service provider. So certificate authority is, as I told at the beginning, there needs to be an identity associated with every participant in the network. Without identity, nobody cannot transact. So, and this identity has to be issued by a recognized authority. So this is called CA. And in case of Fabric, we have one authority called Fabric CA, from which all the participants, either it can be peer, order, or client, or anybody, right? So they will be getting an identity and use the identity throughout the life cycle. So that is the Fabric CA. So what it means by identity, they will get typically a public key and a private key. And so what they do, any transaction they are submitting, right, they will sign digitally the transaction using their private key, and any receiver of that transaction, for example, they want to validate, because they know for a given submitter what is the public key. Using that public key on that specific document, they can verify that signature digitally, and if that verification passes, then they knows that okay, the specific individual actually has submitted this transaction, and I can accept this transaction. They will do that, right? So this is the specific intention of the certificate authority. They provide basically identity to any individual, and that identity will be the other members in the network will be able to validate this identity. So I will give at this point in time one example. For example, this CA is similar to holding a credit card. So one can have, for example, credit card from Visa and, for example, Master, 2 different kinds of credit cards I have. So how I get the credit card, I need to undergo with some validation process with that specific credit card issuing agency. So they will take my documents, they verify my address, my identity, all those things. And once they come to know that, okay, all these details are correct, then they will issue me a credit card. So that is equivalent to you are getting a identity from the CA, certificate authority. Now, what can happen? Assume that you are visiting a store and you want to exercise a transaction using that credit card. For example, that store is only accepting Amex card. Then even though I have 2 different identities, Visa and MasterCards, I cannot use them because it is different from what that specific store is accepting. It is accepting only Amex card. That is a different type of credit card, right? All of you are aware. So even though I'm possessing 2 identities, my identities are valid, I cannot actually use my identity to achieve the transaction. So that is precisely what is the responsibility of MSP. membership service provider. So what MSP ensures is that even though somebody is bearing a valid identity, it's not just enough having just a valid identity. Anybody cannot go and perform a specific action activity in a channel. They have to be recognized as part of MSP, saying that okay, this identity can bear a specific role in this channel, and only if you are doing that specific activity in that channel with that identity, everybody will be able to verify you are the intended participant to carry out that activity, and they will allow the transaction. So these are the two important things: MSP and the CA. CA is equivalent to, in that example, the issuer, and the identity is equivalent to your credit card. And you can have multiple different identities that is equivalent to your processing Visa and MasterCards, two different credit cards you can have. And MSP is equivalent to whether you will be able to carry out a specific transaction or not. So similar to that example, just to recall, in the store, for example, the store is only accepting Amex card, even though you have two cards, they are not useful to carry out that transaction at that point in time. Similarly, if MSP says that you are not an intended participant for this channel, even though you carry a identity from a valid Fabric CA, you cannot access a participant in that channel. So that is one analogy that I can give so that it is more clear. Each Fabric CA actually in turn consists of the following components, like it has a DB and it has a LDAP server to authenticate. So why? Because any other participant, they can always come back to the CA and say verify whether a given identity to any participant is valid or not. They will use this validate using this LDAP service, and then hardware security module. This will provide additional security guarantee for the CA itself. So let us go over the how to set up the network. The first part in the network setup is configure the network and start the ordering service. So the first and foremost thing is that we have to start the ordering service. This is the first aspect. Anyway, in the second half today, my colleague Abhishek will actually take you through the hands-on session where you will be looking into these steps in more detail, but I'll just take you through the different steps involved in the bootstrapping of a network. So the first step is you have to configure the ordering service. The next step is start the peers, add as many peers as you want as per the requirement of the channel, right? Whoever is the different roles you want to have in the network, you need to add all those roles, and then install the chain code. So with whoever peer, you need to associate the specific chain codes. You will install those chain codes, and then you have to create the different channels. In this case, there can be 3 channels actually, and associate the different peers into the channels. So for example, here E2 and P3 are participating yellow channel, E0 and E1 are participating red channel, and E0, E2 are in the blue channel. As already we see, each peer can be part of multiple channels at any point in time. And then instantiate chain code. Once the chain code is instantiated, now transactions will be able to be submitted. So endorsement policies. Endorsement policy, as I already told, is exercised at multiple places, for example, by the client at the time of transaction proposal submission, and also by the committing peers at the time of validation process. So they use these 2 different chain codes. ESCC, endorsement system chain code, is used by the endorsing peers to sign the endorsements, and the VSCC is used to validate whether a given signature is proper or not, whether the given endorsement is proper or not, is carried out by the VSCC, by the committing peers. So ESCC is only available with the endorsing peers, whereas VSCC is available with all the peers, both endorsing and committing peers. Everybody will validate before committing to the ledger. any write set, they have to validate whether VSCC is proper or not. So the endorsement policy syntax, endorsement policy, as I already said, it can be associated with the channel and a specific chain code. And what it tells is that who can be executing the transactions submitted in this channel. So not everybody can execute the transaction. At least one needs to execute. So who are all the members eligible to execute? So that is configured as part of endorsement policy specification. So typically, this is the how we mentioned that who in the based on the role. For example, any person, any peer which is a member of organization 1, they can be able to execute the transaction, simulate the transaction for this channel. The channel name is my channel in this case, and chain code is my chain code, MYCC, version is 1.0. As I said, it is possible to dynamically update the chain code later on during the course of your channel in execution. That time also you can upgrade your chain code to next version 1.2 or 1.5, whatever it is, you can upgrade dynamically. That is possible. And each time you are updating, you can associate the specific endorsers also as per the endorsement policy. Right. So endorsement policy can be specified in the different ways, like whether if you want the endorsement policy endorsers. In our example throughout, we were seeing that 3 peers are endorsing any transaction. Now if the endorsement from those 3 peers is all of them is mandatory, you specify that using a AND constraint. Say that ARG1 member, ARG2 member, ARG3 member, all of them need to endorse this transaction to go through. That is using AND policy. Whereas there can be a different policy, which is R policy, which says that one of the members from these organizations is sufficient to execute this transaction. So that we can specify using R, right? So there can be a complex way to verify also, specify your requirement. For example, you want the endorsement to happen at least one of ARG2 and ARG3 and the ARG1 mandatorily. So this can be the specific policy using R and you can specify. So next one is the organizations. So this is again a logical concept, organization. So organizations contain one or more peers, and they have optional ordering service associated with the organization. And each organization has an MSP. The MSP, membership service provider, as I said, it will specify what are all the identities which can carry out a specific role. For example, a peer admin. Who can be the peer admin? What can be the identity of the peer admin? So everything is specified in the MSP. So similarly, users. Who are all the valid users for this organization? Right. So that is again specified in the MSP. So each organization defines the MSPs, who are all the administrators, who are all the users, and whether that organization is having a optional orderer or not, and who are all the peers. So this is the information is tracked with each organization. And consortium network, this is nothing but the channel consortium network. So we now have defined all the components, right? So we can form the network now. So here this network shows me that I have 3 organizations. As I said in the bank example, this can be a bank, and this can be one of the users, for example, a buyer organization, and there can be a seller organization. If buyer is buying something from the seller, and there has to be money transaction, so that will happen via the ARG1, which is a bank in this case, in this example, right? So that's how the different organizations part of the business transaction will be made part of the channel, and each channel need to have an orderer, otherwise your block cannot be created, right? So it is a mandatory service. So I think we have gone over the MSP details already. Maybe I will pause now for queries.
So there is one query whether is software or combined thing.
Okay, ordering services, hardware, software are combined. So typically ordering service is the peer and the specific actions it takes, right? So it is both hardware and software. So it has to be a server ordering service. It is a collection of nodes and they carry out specific activity. So that activity is the software and the collection of nodes are hardware. So ordering service is both. So because we have 10 more minutes, maybe let me go over if there are no additional queries. Why do we have local MSP associated with every component in this architecture? As I said, for example, client is submitting a transaction proposal. How does it know that this is the actual peer, right? So a given peer for a channel is the endorsing peer. Then the client needs to submit the transaction to the endorsing peer. This we already know. When it is submitting to the endorsing peer, how does it know that this is actually the proper endorser? So by referring to the local MSP, it will know. So that's why we need a local MSP for the client. Similarly, for the endorsing peer, why do you need to have a local MSP? Now, when endorsing peer is receiving a client, transaction from a client, how does it evaluate whether the transaction is submitted by a valid user of this network? Again, you refer to the local MSP, you will come to know, okay, this is a valid client, hence I can accept the transaction proposal. If the local MSP doesn't show this user as the valid client, then the transaction submitted by that client will not be entertained by the endorsing peer, right? So that's how we need a local MSP with the endorsing peer, and so on and so forth. Hence, it is the purpose is the same. They validate the authenticity of the other elements of the network when they are transacting. Each specific component is using local MSP to validate whether a given transaction is proper or not, right? So I will show you. Yeah. So these are the different kinds of validations that happen over the course of transaction execution. So first one is transaction is signed by the client and submitted to the peer in the role of endorser, right? This is the first transaction proposal submission. Then the signature of the client is validated and the transaction is simulated by the endorsing peer. So this is again the second place when the signature is validated. Then what happens? The endorsing peer again signs the endorsement and sends back the response to the client. Now the client will validate whether the endorser signature is correct, whether I am receiving this response from a proper endorsing peer or not. The client will validate. So till this time, the transaction is not yet submitted to the orderer, but you can see that 4 different types of signature validations are done. So the next step is the client sending the transaction message to the orderer. When the orderer receives, again, before sending, it has to sign the transaction message. It prepares the transaction message, which consists of the transaction details and also the endorsements that it received from all the endorsers for this channel. So once it creates the transaction message, it will sign and sends to the ordering node, ordering service, right? So again, here it will validate the client signature. So this is a different stage by the orderer. So this is the sixth time where the validation is happening. The next one is once the orderer creates the block, it will again sign the block and disseminate the block to all the peers. So that time again it will sign, right? So it does the signing and all the committing peers which are receiving this, it can be committing peer or endorsing peer. The block is disseminated to everybody, right? So any peer which is receiving this block, again it will validate whether I am receiving the block from a proper orderer or not, right? So at different points in time, this way we have to validate the signature. Hence, all of them need to have access to the MSP, whether this is allowed or not, right? So just by referring to that example that I was quoting, everybody needs to check whether this is, for example, the transaction that example is happening by use of Amex card, right? So they will have to check whether the user is holding a valid Amex card, credit card or not. If he is holding a valid Amex credit card, only then the transaction can proceed in that example. Similarly here, they need to verify whether the signature is from using a valid identity or not from a authentic CA, that is the Fabric CA in this case, right? So this is the different places the signature is validated, and maybe the peer and ordering identities. I'll just over the identities with the admin. What kind of identities we have? We have a private key. As I said, identity includes two components. One is the public key and the private key. Private key is stored in the key store. Public key is part of the digital certificate that is issued by the CA to the individual. So this certificate form follows a specific standard called X509 standard. So this is the most accepted digital certificate standard. It will have some field called subject actually, which will tell who is the user, and in addition to just the identity, right, the certificate also certifies what is the role of that specific user. For example, in this case, this user is an admin. Then that certificate will contain, yes, this is an admin, and which organization he belongs to, which organization unit internally in the organization, which organization unit he or she belongs to, right? So, and what are the intended roles for him or she, right? So what are the intended roles? So all this information, and what is the, for example, it can be, for example, a voter ID. What is your local address? Which locality you belong to? Which city? Which country? So similar to that, it is similar to a voter ID, right? It's a digital certificate. It will contain all the details, which organization and roles that you play. So yeah, so maybe I will stop here. We will take this in the next session, the encryption and SideDB.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krishna Suri. So I am having one quick question for you. That is it possible for an organization to act as both in application role and ordering role?
An organization can submit transactions, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, an organization can submit transactions, and so in that case, actually, I understand your query, right? So it can be following whatever is the step that we have explained. All that protocols process it can be undertaking. At the same time, it can be submitting a transaction also. Yes. For example, as I said, right, the channel configuration transactions, they can be submitted by the organizations also. Right. So for example, ordering service is an organization, and ordering service submits the channel configuration transaction, which will be part of the Fabric blockchain network again. Just I'm giving an example. Otherwise, it can be any other transaction also. But configuration transactions are submitted by the ordering service nodes, which is the ordering service organization, and they are part of the ledger.
Okay, thank you so much, Krishna Suri. Thank you.